grab some snacks and a cozy drink because this is gonna be so long. Hey, it's Cecil, and it's Monday, and this lore talk is the culmination of 2.5 years worth of research, art, and formulating a narrative. Today we're talking about the three god kings of Sumeru. They ruled together sometime during the Archon Wars, before ultimately two of them died, leaving the Greater Lord Rukkhadevata as the sole Archon of the region. Except for one little thing. This shit is so polyamory coded. Alright? It's easiest to accept things and interpret it from here on out if you just accept that the three of them were in love and married. Okay? This is still, they didn't have to write it like that, but they did. So while this is still largely a lore talk, delving into the in-game history, I'm not going to hold my analysis on the romance side of things because, yeah, they all kissed on the mouth. That is my truth. Thank you. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started with a little overview of the gods, starting with Rukkhadevata. Under the instructions of the first sage, the ancestors of the forest people made these talismans using withered trees to commemorate the Lord of Verdure. The talisman's shape was inspired by the forest dew. It symbolizes the permeation of wisdom into mortal minds. Later, the Lord of Verdure taught people the mystery of forging black iron. The innocent mortals thus grasped the knowledge of using fire to forge blades. The Lord of Verdure took pleasure in their knowledge. Lethal as fire and blades were to her, they made ordinary people powerful. In the myriad lore of the forest, the one in the striped cape that resembled blazing flames was the greater lord of the labyrinths, and the owner of the moon-mirrored spring. When he bowed his head and struck up a friendship with the Lord of Verdure, the tokens of their friendship were the gems that glimmered like water and silver that gleamed like the moonlight. To repay such a gesture, the Lord of Verdure promised to keep secrets for the Greater Lord of Labyrinths, and safeguard the intricate and beautiful dreams of the rainforest. No one could have foretold that the magnificent mansion of secrets and dreams would later fade away amidst the shroud of the dark flame of oblivion, after which its ash returned to the soil and became nutrients for the virgin rainforests. Mortals hold dear three things only: the spring water that embraces the moonlight, verdant life, and ageless youth. The nature of wisdom is not domination over all minds or scheming to gain all the benefit. Instead, it is about empowering even ordinary beings to one day overcome their imposed constraints. Though the roar of the tiger is no longer heard in the forest, and the resilient guardians would seclude themselves within the dreams of children, on the night when every secret golden seal is lifted and all dreams glow like amber in the moonlight, perhaps she and her beloved people will eventually win genuine freedom. Rukkhadevata was the first Dendro Archon, so she was Nahita's predecessor. She was the goddess of wisdom, the Lord of Verdure, the princess of somewhere, presumably, and the avatar of Irminsul. We're not entirely sure what avatar of Irminsul means, but most likely she was born from or near or of Irminsul in some way. She is a literal manifestation of the world tree. She comes across as pragmatic in her philosophies and decision-making. She seems to think through all of the possibilities and meanings of something before she decides what is best. We're paying attention to cause, effect, the cycles of nature, the consequences of actions. Next up, Nabu Malikata. People used to say that the Lord of Flowers was the Lord of joy and happiness. Fresh water sprang from her sleeves, and thus was the oasis of blossoming flowers born in the desert. Flowers and grasses followed in her footsteps, and gleaming moonlight cleared the way for her. In the bitter days when the sky turned its back on the ground, the Lord of Flowers extended her mercy to each and every one of the mortals, letting them regain their happiness and egos, allowing leisure and luxury to resume. In the literature buried deep beneath the yellow sands, the Lord of Flowers was the mistress of dreams. She bestowed dreams upon the exiled, the manic, and the foolish. In those dreams they were presented with their dearest delights. Burdened by the brutality of reality, they were fascinated by the charm of the Lord of Flowers and captivated by her beauty and care. The Lord of Flowers was in an amicable relationship with the Jinn. The Mistress of Flowers and Oases joined hands with the Lord of Desert and built Ai-Khanum, the city of amphitheaters, which carried the meaning of City of the Moon Maiden in the ancient language of the Jinn. However, it was said that the Lord of Flowers died due to the malice of the burning sun and yellow sand, after which the blossoms of purple padisaras were never again seen in the oases. After the departure of the Lord of Flowers, the sandstorms keened, the Jinn sobbed, and the moonlight silver gem disc lost its original glad purpose, giving off a mournful glimmer. Who would worship a departed god? The Lord of Flowers was once in an alliance with two other gods. Apart from wisdom and power, she also brought mercy and joy to her people. Just as the earth needs more than the burning sunshine and pouring rain, to the people of the Lord of Flowers, joy and love, singing and music, wine and extravagance were just as vital as strength and sensibility. It is said that flowers blossom so that they may enjoy a spectacular death, and that death was precisely the wholehearted pursuit of the Lord of Flowers. For death adds bitterness to lost joy and intensifies with time across endless memories. The ignorant Lord of Deserts was never aware of her reasoning. He only reveled in her immense charm and grace, and as misguided as such fervent affections might be, they were well within the calculations of the Lord of Flowers. Nabu Malikata was the goddess of flowers, mistress of dreams, queen of all oases, and a survivor of the angelic race. She fought in the War of Funerary Flame, on the side of the heavenly principles, from what we can gather, but she was cast out of the heavens all the same, doomed to the same fate as the rest of her kin. She wandered in the desert for 72 days, and where her blood landed, springs flowed, and from those springs padisaras bloomed, and out of the padisaras the Jinn were born. Also, possibly in her grief, when she cried, the tears formed the Sapphire City, where the Tagnarians flourished, Telechala. This might be a bit more metaphorical, because whilst the Tagnarians are from the desert, it doesn't seem like they all moved to the Sapphire City until, way later. So this one might be a metaphor, but it might have, my guess is that these were beings who were affected by Nabu Malikata's divinity. They seem to be something a bit more powerful than regular humans, just based on, what we know about. But that's as far as King Deshret. A long time ago, the people of the Lord of Deserts carved these imperial insignias based on robust beetles to memorialize the bright sun that marked the shifting of day and night, as well as the infinity of such times. Though the name of that lord is no longer mentioned, these imperial insignias have been preserved through time, each bearing a faint ambiance of those past glories. These insignias travel with the descendants of the Aramite tribe, silently telling the tales of their then lord. To weave together myriad thoughts and reign over countless souls, this is the essence of power. However, power is not a cold-blooded tyranny. Its true ideal, at its heart, is to create a utopia free of worry, schemes, and slavery. It was just as the Silent Lord saw in the crystal's secrets, and just as the lost companion had once taught. The dark insect insignia and the steel judgment thus laid the foundation of the kingdom's rules. Silver moonlight and clear springs once completed the scenery of the oases. But as the Lord of Flowers faded into the darkening sandstorm, so was the worryless garden paradise submerged by death. In the poetry of the Aramite tribe, the moon cast its silver light on the crimson mantle, causing Al-Ahmar, the morning king, to be driven to madness. In a melancholic desert ballad, driven by the haunting nostalgia, the lonely king created an ever-youthful dreamland in the center of the desert, where undisturbed water sprang up and perpetual dusk remained. In the era when the ignorant lord of deserts ruled, his power descended upon every inch of the land like the scorching sun. Ancient stone tablets that record that he turned his power into 7 rays of blinding light, or 7 pillars, which he granted equally and mercifully to everyone. No one was neglected, nor was anyone discontented. That was a forgotten golden era, an era when the Lord of Flowers had faded into the sands, and the Lord of Verdure was determined to leave. Only the descendants in the yellow sand chose to follow their god. Even as the grim shadow of calamity loomed, the power in which they had faith shone brightly like amber and gold, yet calamity befell nonetheless, and the golden insectoid insignias were buried beneath the depths of shrine and palace, under collapsed pillars engraved with images of eagles and bulls. Deshret was the Lord of Deserts, God of the Great Red Sands, Lord of the Blazing Sun, God of War and Order. We don't know much about him before he met Nabu Malikata and Rukkhadevata. He appears to be curious about the past, seeking knowledge, and incredibly justice-driven, if not at times blinded by his own principles. There's also a lot of connection to Pyro and the sun in his imagery, which could mean nothing, or it could mean something. We'll come back to this. But first, we have to revisit the War of Funerary Flame again. So, 6,000 years ago, Sutervoinen come down to Teyvat, possessing a young man, for reasons. He seeks out the first angel, Koitar, beneath the Irminsul tree in the area that was, at the time, Hyperborea in the far north. He shows her the truth of the world, and it breaks her divine crown. They fall in love and get married, and start plotting to overthrow the heavenly principles. Meanwhile, the Dragon King Nebelung gets back with the milk and abyss, and walks up to the Three Moons like, hey, I thought I told you not to let anybody in while I was gone. And they're like, to be fair, you were gone for like a really long time, and they didn't seem to be making the whole situation worse, just different. So the heavenly principles had to punish the arrogation of mankind, that's what you always say, Fanies, and fight a very reasonably pissed but badly abyss-tainted sovereign dragon king of the planet they stole. They eventually win, and they throw down divine nails to heal the land, allegedly. It also does some massive destruction, and is conveniently located over major centers of civilization. Curious. As we've discussed, the divine nail that went over the chasm is probably what made it a big-ass crater. Over on Dragonspine, created an eternal winter. Tsurumi Island may have gotten the consequences of a nail that created the Sea of Fog, perhaps. In Natlan, it's suggested that the nail that we see in the Night Kingdom also created the big-ass crater that creates the basin of primal flame. The desert nail turned what was a formerly lush and verdant land into desert. This subdued the Dendro Sovereign, Apep, from what I can tell. Maybe there was one in Hyperborea. It probably is what caused Snezhnaya's whole eternal winter deal, but that's for a different lore talk. Anyway, the rest is history. The Moon Sisters are sent to time prison by Nebelung, the angels are cursed 5-ever by the heavenly principles, and humanity is fated to return to barbarism for a while. This is the cycle of civilizations. The fate of the angels revisited. Again. The traitorous envoy was stripped of both name and form, and from that moment an ancient curse fell upon her kin. If they dared gaze into another's eyes, and to one alone offer the love that was meant for all, then not only would their divine beauty crumble into the wind, but their minds would fall to dust, until from the fallen one's remains a Seelie would rise, forever drifting in search of fading memories to consume. The wording here does a lot of my work for me, actually, because I don't have to explain why Nabu Malikata was fine until she died. If you take her to only be Deshret's lover, then she should have met her demise sooner than she did. Yeah. Further on this, one of Wolfie's lines in the theater comes when you ask him, why wolves? And he tells you this little story. It is said that the Boar tribe were once all wild boars, but the boars did bad things, so the master wanted to punish them. The master took out a rusted set of scales and told the boars to stack their own things on both sides. If the scales tipped to one side, they could leave. But the scales were so rusty that just putting a small amount of weight was not enough to move them. Those boars who placed their heads on the scales became wolves, lizards, and snakes, leaving only their strength. Those who offered their muscles became rabbits, leaping 3 paces to a bound, instinctively guiding people to treasure. So this implies that angels could keep their form or their mind, their wisdom, rarely both, and most succumb to the curse eventually. When we talk to Nicole at the Witch's Garden, one of her dialogues pretty much confirms this. And by pretty much, I mean it just does. It confirms it.
As everyone knows, well, actually, hardly anyone knows. Anyway, when the angels were destroyed, they had to sacrifice either their preferred form or their power.
Since Nabu Malikata directly references that she's maintained her form, it seems that what she gave up was possibly her power, which is bonkers bananas to me, because this means her clairvoyance, the divinity in her life's blood, and the wisdom she still had, that was all after being stripped of power, potentially, unless the horned humanoid is, like, not her preferred form. But it sounds like she's maintained her form, because she said it. You know what I mean? So, first, an elephant you may not have even realized was in the room. We're addressing it. We don't know what gods are in this game, okay? I have to make this point, because first of all, we've got Andreas, a normal wolf who bumped into the first angel and became immortal and powerful, Urabashi, giant serpent. We know that he was fighting in the Archon Wars in Liyue before he fled. Marcosius, or Guoba, is some kind of giant teddy bear. Don't know for sure if Kana Kapatsier is a god, but she was a powerful, immortal bird, and when the Raiden Shogun killed her, it would have been around the time of the Archon Wars, so, like, why not, I guess? Bifrons? Yeah, that's a sapient mushroom. That's a sapient mushroom. And Taudu? Yeah, this god is a tree. So, we're all aware that we're looking at a tree, yes? Even the Archons, who we mostly see in humanoid forms, aren't humans. So, you know, we've got a dragon chillin', we've got a wind spirit, we have an Oceanid. Yeah. All 3 god kings are acknowledged as gods, hence the title that they held together. Nabu Malikata was an angel. Now, this is the first time that in-game we hear an angel be referenced also as a god, but it won't be the last time, because with Zabai, that has also come up again. Rukkhadevata was Irminsul's literal avatar, which rings familiar to Egeria being created as the heart of Tebat. And King Deshret was also there. I'm kidding. Kind of. We don't really know what he looked like. We have pictures of, like, his eye symbol. He might have had animal features, like many of his sages. You know, point is, No clear definition on what gods are in Tevat other than immortal and super powerful. And this doesn't necessarily affect the narrative, but like it does bother me. And like the Adepti and the Yokai and the Fae are immortal, but they are distinctly separate from gods because they're not like as immortal as. Anyways, I digress. Um, Meet cute. So, around the time of the Archon Wars, which began about 3,700 years ago, Rukkhadevata comes to Nabu Malikata, curious of the other god's wisdom that she's heard so many rumors about. Nabu Malikata poses 3 questions to her. What is cold as the dead while alive, yet gives warmth upon death? What rises from the earth, then descends from the sky? What cannot stop arrows, yet can stop destruction? Cannot destroy armor, but can destroy cities? What can neither gods nor demons, for all their might, prevail over? Rukkhadevata's answers to each riddle was the rose of late spring, covered in thorns while alive but still beautiful, made into perfumes and wicks of oil lamps in death. The divine laws established in the beginning, none have seen them, but they govern all. And endless wisdom. It protects civilization and will outlive everything. I am paraphrasing heavily because the text source for it is very much damaged in that area, which is. I love the realism to the archaeology, but it does make my job harder. The 2 princesses forged a strong alliance, and also Deshret was there. Which I wish was more of an exaggeration, but that is pretty much how the book ends, of just like, and also with the king of the red sand. But he also got 3 riddles. I'm giving him a hard time. My guess is that he probably met Nabu Malikata before the 2 of them met Rukkhadevata, which is why only those 2 are credited with building Icannum together. Extrapolating from the fact that Nabu Malikata's first act was to test Rukkhadevata's wisdom with riddles, I think she probably did the same to Deshret, and we do know these questions from our boy Thoth. What causes our rise and fall? What obliterates love and hate? What determines truth and falsehood? We do not have a record of Deshret's answers, but I'm going to assume he maybe got them right, or maybe he didn't, and that's why he's referred to as a foolish king. Who's to say? I'm also assuming that the answers that Thoth was given are not correct, but we're not here for him. And after all of this, like the bright silver moon, the blazing golden sun, and the emerald fields, the 3 god kings made themselves oath-bound friends. While the Archon Wars raged on, King Deshret allowed his throne to be shared with 2 others. The Jinn bequeathed the throne inlaid with emeralds and rubies to celebrate the union between the 3 friends. We don't know much about the era during which they ruled all together, but Nabu Malikata was said to control the banquet, Deshret held the authority, whatever that means in this context, and Rukkhadevata's domain was life. You asked me once why I always sigh. Do you want me to kill that guy for you? Nabu Malikata knows that Deshret will rebel against the heavens once he knows everything. The rebellion is already in him, and she does admire it. But if we can learn anything from all the records about the heavenly principles that we do have, it's that they really do not like records existing about them. They're really about that vague yet menacing government agency life. One day, she does tell him what happened. The War of Funerary Flame, the exile of the angels, the divine nails, and the delusions of the abyss. She warns him against rebellion, warns him against seeking out more information, but he decides that he's gotta do it anyways. And she knows. She wants him to do it because, quote, Only by suffering through the destruction of a god's delusions can humanity learn to rise against divine will. I once encountered a faceless nightmare in my dreams, and it frightened me to no end. And so I separated you from my body, and I ask you now to prevent that nightmare's coming. And then it gets sad. I know. Doomed god kings are doomed. More at 11. Nabu Malikata dreams of the cataclysm and Sumeru's fate within it. In response to this, she severs a piece of her soul, the Kavarna, and gives it to Rukkhadevata. Kavarna, as far as I can tell, is just like straight up extract day divinity. Yeah, gods really are just out here severing parts of their souls. Traveler is so right in Varka's story quest. Incomprehensibly common event in Tevat. Anyways, she confides everything in Rukkhadevata, the abyssal corruption, the monsters, the grey death, havoc to be wreaked upon the mortal realm, and gives this little piece of her soul to be cared for and brought up until it is strong enough to purify the land. This is essential for Sumeru's future and survival, and Rukkhadevata, of course, agrees. Please protect this Kavarna for me, my companion, my friend whom I love. And then they sleep together. Like gal pals do. That's just what the text says. They slept beside each other that night after the whole conversation. Also, according to Sorash, the Kavarna was given to Rukkhadevata at the first Sabzeruz festival, which means that it was Rukkhadevata's fucking birthday. Sick and twisted, so messed up, and probably the last time that they ever saw each other. To quickly recap, Deshret wants to 1v1 the heavenly principles for what they did to his love and her kin. Nabu Malikata foresees the apocalypse. Nabu Malikata gives a piece of her soul to Rukkhadevata for safekeeping and tells her what she knows. Rukkhadevata has now, 2,000 years to prepare for the prophecy. Deshret thinks that Rukkhadevata left them because she doesn't want to be associated with their rebellion plans. I think that Rukkhadevata was a little busy thinking about the fucking apocalypse. I shall fashion you a bridge to allow you to slake your deepest wants, but you must fear not the crystalline sapphire nail. I will deliver you unto higher knowledge, but as I have warned, you are fated to lose much in this exchange. Nevertheless, hide my lesson in your heart. Remember the punishment that was once inflicted on the fallen envoys of heaven. Know this, if there is to be hope in this world, it will be found kindling within mortals most ordinary. Nabu Malikata uses her body as fuel to convey forbidden knowledge, or at least to create a bridge to it, offering up the oasis and her life in exchange. He sees the golden dream and enters it, and her life force is consumed. The oasis is destabilized by her death. A violent sandstorm tears through the region. I just dreamed of you, feeling your way through the walls of a crystalline maze. All that can be seen is but sand. Deshret does not immediately jump into overthrowing the heavenly principles. He just lost Nabu Malikata. He grieves, while his retainers wait to see what he will do next. An excerpt from the Lay of Al-Akhmar. Your Majesty, ruler of the world, lord of the four corners of the earth, king over jinn and mortals alike. The Goat King, the minister of all ministers, spoke flatteringly. I humbly beg your pardon if I overstep, but your Majesty, I'm certain that you are aware that indulging in dreams of old and sorrows of the past is no way to be for long. The endless power and wisdom of this land can build you a palace that surpasses the heavens, your Majesty, and it shall bring your people a prosperous future. No, Al-Akhmar said with a frown, and the Goat King fell silent. Your Majesty, son of the sky, subjugator of gods and greatest of all sages, the Ibis King, the scribe of all scribes, advised. The divine punishment of 1,000 years past has brought the downfall of wisdom and history. For a better future, Your Majesty, you should take control of the past. The present oases hold the wisdom of the present, but if we are to seize the past, we must act swiftly. No. Al-Ahmar struck the ground with his staff, and the Ibis King fell silent. Your Majesty, Lord of Dunes and Oases, Guide of the living and dead, Master of all elements. The Crocodile King, the commander of commanders, spoke frankly. If we are to recall the lost lives and welcome the lost opportunities back into the fold, then this is our final chance. The greater the authority, the greater the emptiness. The greater the wisdom, the greater the sorrow. Forget the delusions of the void. Only resurrection and life eternal can fill the endless pit of regret. Al-Ahmar fell silent. Fine.
The three retainers break Deshret out of his mourning and goad him into action. He uses the remnants of the oasis combined with the power of the divine nail and creates the eternal oasis. Time is frozen, untouchable by the outside world. It is a cemetery to Nabu Malikata. It is also the only place in-game where the record was not scrubbed of Greater Lord Rukkhadevata. And back on my polyamory agenda, quickly, why? Why would Deshret include all three of them if this was specifically a mausoleum to Nabu Malikata, the death of his lover? He was also grieving the loss of Rukkhadevata, albeit in a different way. The fact that all three of them are together, the world he yearns for, is one where all three of them are together again. It just doesn't make sense if he's madly in love with Nabu Malikata and Rukkhadevata's just, like, also there. He then spends about 200 years creating a maze under the sands, and you may know it, because that is the area under the desert pyramids that many of the first World Quest chains take place, relating to the Eternal Dream, in particular, with all of the keys and the doors and the puzzle. Yeah, I can see how that is, in fact, a maze. Good to know he did it on purpose. And then he plops himself down on his throne to pursue forbidden knowledge, to enlighten all and free them from the shackles of divine law.
Alright, we got a lot of history to get through, so we're gonna have to move fast, because this technically happens because of the God Kings, but none of them are really there for most of it, so it's like context, but it's not their story. There's a shepherd named Ormazd, and he's a swell dude. He gains the favor of King Deshret, as well as the genie Lilipar. You may remember her as the racist bottle that followed us around while we were looking for the Eternal Oasis. Thanks to this favor, Ormazd becomes king, but he's not the benevolent king that Lilipar wishes he will be. Power turns him into yet another tyrant. They have a daughter together named Shirin, and Ormazd adopts an orphan named Kisra, who is actually Lilipar's son. And because Kisra gains Ormazd's favor, he gets to marry Shirin. He doesn't love her, and Shirin feels rather slighted about this. There's a prophecy about everyone that Shirin, like all of Shirin's family, dying, and that her child will, prophecies are involved. We don't have time. Shirin confides in Lilipar about this. Lilipar gives her poison drinks to serve to Ormazd and all her siblings, but not her husband half-brother, though. They all die at dinner together, and Shirin goes mad with grief at the realization of what's happened. Kisra becomes king, and he and Shirin have a child together. Kisra is yet another tyrant, and their child ends up helping to lead the rebellion against him. Their child kills Kisra. Gurabad falls. All of this, I guess, pushes Deshret further into delusion, and that's just the TLDR. There are several details we have skipped.
But meanwhile, in the jungle, Rukkhadevata leaves the desert, and she, leaves what we currently consider the desert behind, because at this time all of Sumeru was basically a desert. She creates the Varuna contraption to nurture the rainforest into existence. And then the moon reflects off of the surface of the labyrinth of the water, whatever that means, and from that reflection, Viagara was born. We can assume he was a tiger of sorts, because that's pretty much how he's described. Kind of like the Rishbalan tigers that would come after. He was considered the Lord of the Forest and the Greater Lord of the Labyrinths. Rukkhadevata also nurtured the Kavarna into the divine bird Sumeru, who went into a deep slumber. She used the dendrognosis to create the Akasha system, borrowing the wisdom of her people's dreams to make herself more powerful, so that she would be better equipped to fight back when the cataclysm arrived. The Aranara. She also creates the Ashvatha tree, which bears a pomegranate-like fruit. From that fruit spills countless seeds, from which sprung up into the dream fairies that we know as the Aranara. They are charged with the protection of the forest and all of its creatures, and are only visible to those who have not yet contributed their dreams into the Akasha. At least that's what's currently true. I do not know if that's always been true. Anyways, lots of safeguards to protect her people from the future Nabu Malikata told her about. Which is why I'm super hesitant to believe that she simply left because Deshret and Nabu Malikata were flirting with treason. She was literally busy. And now, Deshret allegedly succeeded in separating his body and his mind. His corpse rots on his throne, and anyone who passes through the maze and sits on his throne and recites a poem can enter the Golden Dream. So, like, gross, but, you know, alright. There were mechanisms set up at Kaj apologies. I'm not sure how to pronounce it in-game necessarily. To gather wisdom. Presumably forbidden knowledge. His ultimate goal, as previously discussed, was to bring the three of them back together, resurrection and eternal life. If they could just have eternity, then they'd never have to face the bitterness of parting again. There are also references to Deshret connecting his consciousness to those of his people. And though that mainly exists in the Lay of Al-Ahmar, given what happens next, I would say it's probably not that far off base. Now, for the part that was on display in the Archon quest. The vengeance gives the mortals chronic illness. So-called divine knowledge is knowledge from the abyss, which is to say, the void realm. Gods and mortals alike are tenants of the human realm, which is fundamentally incompatible with the void realm. The abyss is corrosive. It contaminates. It spreads like a plague, probably because of all of the knowledge collection and Deshret's attempts to link his consciousness to all of his people. People are overcome with madness. Their bodies begin to grow gray, hardened scales. It's devastating on the ecosystem, and it's certainly no closer to usurping the divine law. It's only killing the people that Deshret is meant to protect. It is like a cold bucket of water dumped on the eternal dream. You can't separate your mind and body to try to bring back your dead lover so that you two and your lover in the forest can be together in an unchanging eternity. Life keeps moving. But I do not wish that the poison ingested by mistake should remain in this world. Perhaps she might, in light of our old friendship. Even if she will not do it for my sake, that is also fine. I only ask that she do me one last favor, for the sake of our mutual friend. Deshret reaches out to Rukkhadevata, who comes to help. He tells her about the situation and how the forbidden knowledge is spreading. Rukkhadevata comes because, of course she does. How could she not? She instructs the priests to build temples and pours her power into the towers. It causes her physical form to regress to that of a young girl. Deshret, still the forbidden knowledge is a problem. So Deshret solves it by sacrificing himself, purifying the land for now. And then also a pep got to eat him, which doesn't really fit in with what we're talking about. It's just kind of a fucked up thing that happened that I thought I should address. It had consequences, but not for these three. So, you know, it's not like relevant. I thought we should. I thought we'd all like to know.
Civilization is born of knowledge, but so too can knowledge be its demise. A disaster caught us unaware. It was knowledge that did not belong to this world. King Deshret brought this forbidden knowledge into our world, and it quickly spread like a plague. People's minds were filled with crazed whispers. Dark gray scales spread across their bodies. Even the land was stripped of its vigor. Only a desperate, deathly silence remained. Were it not for greater Lord Ruka Devata from the forests, the damage would have been irreversible. She summoned the priests to build temples and infused into them the divine power of life. The disaster was miraculously tempered, and the embers of our civilization were preserved in Aru village. Alas, the miracle could not last. As long as forbidden knowledge continued to exist, it would forever blight this world. In the end, the proud king of the desert, my eternal lord, chose to sacrifice himself. I have spent my whole life since guarding one of these many temples. But now, my duty is coming to an end. As I close my eyes for the final time, the sight of that noble deity will appear in my vision once more. In helping King Deshret to eradicate forbidden knowledge, she exhausted her strength, and her form became that of a small child. How strange. Now that I think of her, I no longer have any fear of death, for I sense that the spirit of life will abide with me during my eternal sleep. Children of the desert, cling no longer to past grievances, but hold tight to the memory of this act of benevolence.
Then, like 1,500 years go by. Rukkhadevata lives on. The Akasha presumably continues to grow in power and probably restore some of her power to her in the coming centuries. Kingdoms rise and fall in the desert. Separation between the forest and the desert continues to grow. Oh, yeah, and the three retainers that we talked about earlier, before Deshret died, he did put them in some sort of alternate dimension jail. You know, we've met Thoth, and frankly, deserved it. And back to the Cataclysm.
Days since we've had to talk about the Cataclysm. Reset to 0. Conra, 500 years ago, 5 chucklefucks let the intrusive thoughts win. Like, literally, if what we saw in Nodcry was anything to go by, the abyss was whispering in their ears, and these guys walked directly into it. But we don't care about them right now, except for the fact that they helped usher in all of the abyssal energy that attacked all of Tivat. A good deal of monsters and fuck you dragons were created by Rhindaughter. It's the apocalypse as foretold by Nabu Malikata, everybody, and it's about to be a doozy. Celestia calls up the 7 and asks them to do what they can to suppress the abyss. They go because this is bad, and protecting humanity is their job. Except one little detail that I would like to not ignore. The Cataclysm killed 4 of the original 7 Archons. And 5 Archons total, but of course, Natlan's Archons have always been humans. We're about to discuss half of those deaths right now, so this matters. And also, just Venti and Zhongli are the oldest Archons is such a different sentiment than Venti and Zhongli are the only ones of their immortal peers to survive the actual apocalypse, and they had to mourn 4 people they'd known for upwards of 1,500 years. So, Pour one out for the saddest two men alive, I guess.
The first Hydro Archon, Egeria, never makes it to Conria. Instead, she dies in the Battle of Tanigi Hollow and becomes the Amrita Pool. As you do. There it is. A dead lady. Rukkhadevata grows the Harvest Totem tree to anchor Egeria's consciousness. Presumably, if my understanding of god deaths is solid, this is probably because when gods are murdered, there seems to be a lot that occurs. But having something to anchor their consciousness to the world seems to be helpful in preventing their dead body from becoming just like a cursed artifact. So, that's good. The commotion wakes up the divine bird Sumeru, who knows what her purpose in this world is. The abyssal corrosion is quickly approaching the new pool, so Sumeru does what she must. She throws herself into the pool and shatters into many pieces, becoming the Pari. And over in Irminsul, Rukkhadevata was never called to Conria. Rather, as the avatar of Irminsul, her duty was to protect the world tree from corruption. If Irminsul became corrupted by the abyss, the consequences for the human realm would be catastrophic. She channels the wisdom from the Akasha and all of her divinity to fight back, but Irminsul is already corrupted, and she's Irminsul's avatar, which means she's corrupted. One person cannot erase themselves from the memory of the world, because there would be too many unfilled holes left behind. And if you remember the Sumeru Archon quest, then you know how this goes. Rukkhadevata creates Nahida as a branch of herself, someone who could remove her from Irminsul. Seriously, gods cannot stop doing this. They should have like a Soul Splitters Anonymous or something. Anyways, in 500 years, Nahida goes into Irminsul to fight against the forbidden knowledge, much like Rukkhadevata had, and learns of this plan and her purpose. Rukkhadevata walks her through erasing her through the records.
We all nestle under the great tree of wisdom, peering out to perceive the world. From the earth and from the rain, we perceive its wonders, until we become a white bird to perch atop a branch, and finally snap off the most important leaf. Once upon a time, I alone dreamed in this world. In my dreams, everybody would also dream after they fell asleep. Wild and wonderful thoughts would emerge from their minds. Some tumbled to the ground, and others floated to the sky, connecting all things in the world into one dazzling net. Among a plethora of worlds were numerous smaller worlds, all of fate, finding within the tapestry their brilliant glow. I gradually understood that these indescribable and constantly changing things are the most profound things in the world. Only they can completely repel the madness. Only dreams can awaken consciousness from the deepest darkness. I'm the one who posed this question, yet also the one who sought a solution. Saving the world with the dreams of the people used to be my answer. And now, you've also found your own answer, and I shall return all the dreams to the people. Goodbye, people of Sumeru. May you be blessed tonight with the sweetest of dreams.
So, now let's get silly with it, making connections, assumptions, and crack theories for funsies, because frankly, and then they all died is fucking sad. Right. Rhetorical appeals and domains of wisdom. I was thinking about how each of the god kings are gods of wisdom in some way and have their own approaches to wisdom. So I loosely tied that into rhetorical appeals and how that relates to their lives and deaths. Rukkhadevata I connected to Logos because of the logic-driven reasoning, think stuff through from every angle, and her death to her was the most logical conclusion. Nabu Malikata is pathos. She has the goal of showing humans the failure of the divine so that they may rise above the gods, which plays on emotional appeals. She also has this goal of having a very bittersweet death. Something romantic, something beautiful, something tragic. Very much emotional appeals. And Deshret is ethos. Do I even have to explain? This guy is so justice driven. He doesn't see the divine law or the divine punishments as just, and you know what? He's fucking right. They're not. Everything he did was to right a perceived injustice, and he was misled and lied to along the way a few times. When he sacrifices himself, it is also to right an act of injustice. Now, stuff is a little less polyamory coded lately. I feel like perhaps when Rukkhadevata erased herself from the narrative and we got further from Sumeru, some stuff got blurrier. There's also some specific things that are said from Nabu Malikata's point of view, more or less, that kind of can get things fuzzy. Understandable. But when we were in Not Cry, someone suggested that King Deshret didn't get the girl he loved. But, like, didn't he? Or do they mean that he didn't revive her? Because there is some confusing wording. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't. But, they are called lovers. Not his love, not just love, not just beloved, lover. Which is a different word with a different connotation. And this could be, this could be translation stuff, but, and without Rukkhadevata, the certainty dissipates, which makes sense. Because, like, if they are lovers, but Nabu Malikata only loved Deshret, she would have succumbed to the curse and become a Seelie long before she could have done all the stuff that she did. But when Rukkhadevata is more entangled in the narrative, it becomes clearer. At least in my reading of it. So, I don't know. I think it's poetic, regardless of if they intended it. They were the 3 eternal companion god kings. That means something. Now, the divine authorities. The divine authority, not the same thing as a gnosis. The divine authorities were hijacked from the dragon sovereigns, whilst the gnosis are pieces of the third descender's dead body. Which, gross. So, like, did Deshret hold Apep's authority over Dendro? Did he reject the gift of the Sumeru gnosis? He's said to have rejected a gift from heaven, and everyone assumes it's a gnosis. But also, Rukkhadevata had the Sumeru gnosis by the time she was in the forest, which presumably means that she already had that, because, like, he didn't seem to have the gnosis. That seems to be something that he rejected. If he had the authority, like, I don't know, he's giving Pyro, you know what I mean? And, like, what is the point of the Archon Wars? Because Morax was already considered the Lord of Geo before Even the War of Funerary Flame, Egeria was literally created to be the replacement for the Hydro Sovereign. Rukkhadevata was a straight up avatar of Irminsul. Why didn't Celestia just hand out the weird pieces of dead guy to the ones they knew for sure would win? Why did they make them kill every other god in the vicinity? What the fuck, dude? And is Deshret like the sun? Prefacing this by saying, no, I don't think so. I think the answer is no. I don't think we know what the sun is referring to or what is referring to the sun with absolute certainty. We're going to talk about the sun. We're also going to be talking about why I think Deshret could have possibly held the Pyro Authority, even if he rejected the Gnosis. So, one of Deshret's titles is Lord of the Blazing Sun, and he's called a Son of the Sky. The words blazing sun come up a few times concerning him. They also come up a few times concerning the Pyro Archon, including Moika's voice line.
Light of the blazing sun!
Maybe it's an issue of translation, but the wording is so similar. So it's plausible. As for what is plausible, expanding on he's giving Pyro, I think that Deshret could have held the Pyro Authority, but rejected the Gnosis. We could and will one day spend another hour-long lore talk talking about the Dragon Sovereigns, but for right now, here's what matters. Heavenly Principles yoinked the elemental authorities from the Dragon Sovereigns and either killed them or entombed them. Xiuhcoatl, the first Dragon Sovereign, was able to keep doing dragony pyro stuff after he woke back up, after the War of Funerary Flame, but he wasn't as powerful or as lucid as before and was corrupted by the Abyss, possibly related to missing some of his authority, but that's just my guess. This is all before Xbalanque's ascension, and Natlan was not even on the Archon War official roster. Also, I think of the times that some of the Eremites say that Deshret was the true god of wisdom, which lines up with the fact that the Pyro Authority and the Sacred Flame seem to be tied to the wisdom of Tevat, based on all of the stuff that happened in the volcano. Also, one of his titles being the god of war and order is just like, I don't know. It's certainly, lines are being drawn. I don't know if they're being drawn on purpose, but it's happening. But that's just one way to read it. So let's talk about the sun. Here are my loosely connected dots.
In a past beyond memory, when even Rex Lapis would still have been young, a star fell from the sky into the barren plains west of Liyue. These plains were transformed into a huge and deep chasm in the wake of that star's descent, and jade would emerge from within, beautiful and limitless, and it would become the foundation for 1,000 years of industrial mining in Liyue thereafter. Legend has it that when that nameless star fell, a fragment of it broke off and crashed into the rocks in northern Lisha. As most know, wordless stones harbored soul and spirit, and in manners and times not witnessed by mortal eyes, they watched and listened to the ley line's pulses, the echoes of alpine springs, and the slow but inexorable movements of the mountains. But unlike the ordinary but enduring stone of the earth, the fragments of the meteorite that fell from the heaven had a proud and agitated temper. Later, when countless gods and rulers fought over the appointed celestial seats, and the very stars and abyss themselves faded, tragedy and evil embarred the breath of the waters and mountains. The fallen star could bear this no longer, and heedless of the great chasm's persuasions to stay, it leapt away towards the heavens.
This is to say, sun fell out of sky during the War of Funerary Flame, fragments scattered. And it created the chasm. If this sounds familiar, it's because we've talked about it before. But then the noise of the Archon War woke the sun up, and it presumably jumped back up into the sky.
Solar Relic, the sands of eons from the Vermilion Hereafter artifacts. It is said that Rex Lapis was still young. The sun was a chariot that raced across the earth. When the 3 sisters of the night sky were martyred in a calamity, the solar chariot fell into a deep gorge. The mountain people, taking it for a sign, repaired the device, allowing it to shine through the darkness again.
The artifact itself is not, in fact, a relic from the Solar Chariot, but rather something from the Cataclysm 500 years ago, but it tells a story almost identical to the records of Jueyun account and specifies the star as the sun. This could be entirely allegorical, referring to the chasm nail as a meteorite. The divine nails could have kicked up enough dust to blot out the false sky in the meantime, but
Shadow of the Sand King, the circlet of Logos from the Gilded Dreams artifacts. The ruler shall come with light that blazes like the sun, and will take from those people the crown woven from rose thorns. The first divine pillar descended from the skies, burying tree and meadow under the flowing sands. The golden sun fell, then rose again, clothing the sea of sand in an opulent death shroud. Later, the venomous winds of time disturbed the slumber of the fallen, attracting nostalgic delusions.
this is an artifact set about Deshret and ends with references to his giving into the abyss. I bring it up because it echoes the imagery of Jueyun and the solar relic. The sun falls out of the sky, its sleep is disturbed after some time, like perhaps 2,300 years between the War of Funerary Flame and the beginning of the Archon War, give or take. In this version, the sun doesn't return to the heavens, but rather it stays to create a flourishing civilization. If the sun fell in Liyue, woke up, and left to Sumeru into the area we now see as the desert, I could see how that could have been perceived as returning to the sky. And with all of this, there's also the most obvious connection that one of Deshret's names is Amun, which happens to also be the name of a real Egyptian god, a god who was fused with Ra, the Egyptian god and incarnation of the sun. Amun wasn't originally one being with Ra, but that change happened in the 16th century BCE. So, it's not a new alternative version. To look up Amun Ra will bring up a page of Amun. So, it's also worth noting that while Amun is in the records we have access to, basically synonymous with Amun Ra, Ra himself had more going on than just Amun Ra. He was fused with many other gods throughout ancient history, had specific aspects for the different times of day. This lines up more with the idea of the sun falling out of the sky and into Langan, creating the chasm and splintering into many pieces. It's possible that during the Archon War, some of those pieces awoke, and it's possible Deshret could be one of those pieces. I don't know if that's at all the case, but it is, an interesting connection to make. He does appear to be less than 6,000 years old simply because he didn't know about the world before the War of Funerary Flame until Nabu Malikata told him about it. There is still so much we do not know. 2.5 years to write this lore talk, and I'm still left with so many questions. What is the sun, anyways? It doesn't really matter, but, it doesn't not matter, It's bothering me. Anyways, the lore refers to the three of them as a unit. Their mutual love and affection is referred to. Their oath and their union. You could read this as a third wheel situation in any direction, but I think it is much more compelling, interesting, and funny to read it as polyamory. Just for a moment, imagine being Phanes. The first angel has defied your law. In the name of love, you decide to collectively punish her entire species for some fucking reason, and you use the specific language that they cannot love an individual person above all others, but it was specifically one individual person that you said. And one of the angels who survives for a while does fall in love, but with two people. So, it doesn't count. Um, in the midst of the tragic endings, I think it's only fair and only right to have a comedic loophole thrown in there. Um, it's also entirely possible that like Nabu Malikata loved them, but it never superseded her love for her people. Like, there's a lot of ways to read it. There's a lot of ways around what the Heavenly Principles have said. I don't think they're actually sticklers to their word, but neither here nor there. Whew, a doozy of a video. Thank you.